Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always. What do we got today?
Well, this time, you've really given us quite the mix. A true crime story from Italy and material on a 1920s London actress named Billy Carlton.
Intriguing. Two very different worlds. I'm curious to see where this goes.
That's the challenge, isn't it? Finding those hidden threads, connecting these seemingly separate stories. And, well, I think our listeners are in for a wild ride.
I agree, and it seems like both these stories really expose something about, well, the darker side of human nature, don't they? The lengths people will go to for love or recognition, or even, well, a kind of twisted sense of protection.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's start in London, shall we? In the dazzling West End. We got Billy Carlton, who becomes a star practically overnight. The youngest leading lady by, like, age 22.
Imagine that, the thrill of the spotlight, the roar of the applause.
Yeah, she has it all. But as her fame grows, there's this secret, this darkness that threatens to unravel everything.
Right, and we can't forget the historical context here. I mean, World War I has just ended, and London is in this period of massive social and cultural change. A new kind of freedom, but also, well, a lot of anxiety and trauma lingering just beneath the surface.
Yeah, and the nightclub scene explodes. These glamorous places offer escape, excitement, and, of course, easy access to drugs, cocaine, opium.
And tragically, Billy gets caught up in it. Her drug use spirals, becoming this open secret amongst the theater elite.
It makes you think, right, about the pressures of fame, especially for women in that era. On a pedestal, but also judged for every single thing they do. Was she a victim of her own ambition, or did those societal expectations push her towards these dangerous escapes?
That's the question, isn't it? And it's one that keeps popping up throughout history.
Then things take a dramatic turn. The Great Victory Ball, a lavish event meant to celebrate the end of the war. Billy arrives in this scandalously sheer dress. I mean, really pushing the boundaries for that time.
Like something you'd see on a modern-day red carpet, maybe. Stars using fashion to grab headlines.
Exactly. And of course, the night is fueled by cocaine. Supplied, we learn, by Billy's friend Reggie, a costume designer.
And later, the inquest reveals that many in their circle knew about, even encouraged, her drug use. It's a pretty grim picture of, well, the hedonistic underbelly of London's elite.
Yeah, it is. The next morning, Billy is found dead in her apartment. The official cause: a cocaine overdose. But the circumstances are, well, murky. Some argue that other drugs found at the scene, like the barbiturates on her nightstand, might have played a role.
What's really tragic is how the inquest becomes this public spectacle. The press sensationalizes Billy's struggles. They exploit the witnesses. It becomes less about finding the truth and more about, I don't know, assigning blame, fueling that narrative of moral decay that was already circulating.
And this is where that yellow peril scare comes in, right? A Chinese man is named as the supposed cocaine supplier, and the media just latches on, blowing it out of proportion.
And to understand the impact of that, we need to clarify what the yellow peril actually was. It was this racist ideology that portrayed East Asian people, specifically the Chinese, as a threat to Western civilization. It was already simmering in British society at the time, and Billy's death just provided the perfect opportunity for it to explode.
It's amazing, really, how quickly the focus shifts from, the complexities of Billy's life to this xenophobic narrative.
Absolutely. The inquest paints London's Chinese community as this den of vice and corruption, responsible for corrupting innocent British women like Billy. It's classic scapegoating, and it shows how a single event can be twisted to fuel those pre-existing prejudices.
Yeah. A chilling reminder that history often repeats itself, the way marginalized groups get targeted, blamed for societal ills. It's a pattern that we still see today.
It certainly is. It's so crucial to recognize those patterns, to understand how fear and prejudice can be used to control narratives, target vulnerable communities.
It's true. Billy's story may be rooted in 1920s London, but it holds up a mirror to our present, doesn't it? Raises critical questions about how we consume information, how we judge others, and the danger of letting fear dictate our perceptions.
And it makes you wonder, how much have we really learned from the mistakes of the past? I mean, really?
Well, that's a question we can continue to think about as we move on to our second story. We're leaving the bright lights and dark corners of London behind and heading to the quiet Italian countryside.
Quite a contrast, isn't it? But as you'll see, the themes of desperation, the desire to protect loved ones, even to a fault, well, those transcend time and place.
All right, so picture this. A small town in Italy. Rolling hills, vineyards, a world away from the hustle and bustle of London.
And at the center of it all, we have Leonardo Signuli. A woman whose life takes, well, a very dark and disturbing turn.
Her story is really fascinating, though, isn't it? I mean, it's so deeply connected to the beliefs and superstitions of that time, of rural Italy in the early 1900s.
Right, that mix of Catholicism and folk magic.
Hmm.
The idea that curses, spells, these things have real power. It creates this incredible backdrop for Leonardo's story to unfold.
Yeah, almost like a fairy tale gone wrong,
Yeah.
you know? And it starts with tragedy. Leonardo's childhood is, well, it's marked by it from the very beginning. Her mother is practically forced to marry the man who assaulted her.
Imagine growing up feeling unwanted, like a burden, carrying the weight of your mother's trauma.
It's heartbreaking. And that trauma, it manifests itself in a chilling way when Leonardo defies her mother and chooses to marry for love.
Her mother curses her, claims she will outlive all of her children.
It sends shivers down your spine, doesn't it? I mean, imagine the psychological impact of that curse, especially in a society where people really believed in these things.
Absolutely. And it seems to come true in a way. Leonardo has 17 pregnancies, but only 4 of her children survive. You can almost feel the weight of that curse bearing down on her, fueling her desperation, her need to find a way to break it.
She becomes obsessed, right? Turns to fortune tellers, palm readers, anyone who might offer a glimmer of hope, a way to protect her remaining children.
It's this primal fear, isn't it? This deep-seated anxiety of motherhood, the lengths a parent will go to shield their children from harm. It's almost universal.
And then it's like things couldn't get any worse, but they do. An earthquake devastates their town, their home, their livelihood. Everything is destroyed.
It's a turning point, isn't it? That earthquake shatters any remaining sense of security, and it pushes Leonardo further into this world of superstition and desperate measure.
Yeah. Her focus narrows to protecting her son, Jeppy, at all costs. And that's where her story takes this horrifying turn.
She becomes convinced that human sacrifice is the only way to save him, especially with the looming threat of World War I on the horizon.
It's such a chilling example of how grief, desperation, how deeply held beliefs can twist even the most powerful human instinct, a mother's love, into something monstrous.
It really is, and the details are, well, disturbing, to say the least. She lures these women to their deaths with false promises, preying on their vulnerabilities.
Like Fina. That story is particularly heartbreaking, led to believe that Leonardo is arranging a marriage for her.
It's calculated manipulation, a complete betrayal of trust. And then what she does with the remains. The soap making, the tea cakes.
It's almost impossible to comprehend, isn't it? The level of delusion, the detachment required to do those things.
It's like she's crossed over into this realm where normal morality no longer applies. She believes she's operating under this higher purpose, that these horrific acts are justified, all in the name of protecting her son.
And what's even more disturbing is how she involves Jeppy in these rituals.
Mhm.
Washing him with the soap, feeding him the tea cakes. It's like she's trying to, I don't know, create this bond with him using the essence of her victims.
Yeah. It speaks to that primal fear of losing him, of not being able to protect him. And in her mind, in that twisted reality she's created, these acts become a way to control fate, to guarantee his survival.
It's a terrifying thought. But it makes you wonder about the extremes any of us are capable of when we're driven by fear, by desperation.
It does, doesn't it? These stories, they really highlight the dark side of human nature, the potential for cruelty that can exist even within the most powerful emotions. Love, grief, that need to protect.
And for a while, Leonardo gets away with it. But eventually, those cracks start to appear. Virginia's sister-in-law, Albertina, she grows suspicious and, well, she alerts the authorities.
It's a good reminder that sometimes just paying attention, trusting your gut, it can make all the difference, even in a situation as horrific as this.
Right. Someone sees through the lies, demands justice, and at first the investigators think Leonardo is covering for her son. But the things she tells them are just too specific, too gruesome. It's like she's almost proud of what she's done, convinced that she was right.
That's the thing about delusion, isn't it? It can be incredibly powerful, warp your sense of morality, lead you to do things you never thought possible.
Absolutely. The trial becomes this huge sensation, and Leonardo sentenced to 30 years in prison, plus 3 years in an asylum.
And here's the real tragedy. Despite all of it, Leonardo's actions, they push Jeppy away. He refuses to acknowledge her sacrifice, cuts off all contact.
It's like this brutal reminder that trying to control fate, manipulating people's lives, it always backfires, and often in the most devastating ways.
It really does. So we have these two stories, both full of darkness and tragedy, but they also offer a glimpse into something more complex. Human motivation, the weight of societal pressures, personal beliefs, the choices we make when we're faced with extreme situations.
Billy and Leonardo, in their own ways, they were both searching for control over their own lives, their destinies, the lives of their loved ones. And their stories serve as these, well, cautionary tales about the dangers of seeking control no matter the cost.
It makes you think, doesn't it? About the choices we all make in our own lives, the compromises we're willing to accept, the lines we might be tempted to cross.
Exactly. And as we wrap up this deep dive into the darker corners of human nature, remember, history is filled with stories like these, stories that force us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves.
And maybe by understanding the past, recognizing those patterns that keep repeating, we can make better choices in the present. Choices that lead us towards something brighter, something more hopeful,